All right, guys, welcome back to Within Tolerance. This is episode 13, and I'm joined with Dylan Jackson once again. And today we don't have any special guests, but we could talk about this in this week's episode. But next week we have a very awesome guest. We have Jay Pearson coming on. And I know Dylan and I are both extremely excited for next week. But for now, we're just going to be talking about our two shops. And then next week we'll have Jay on, and we'll be talking about all sorts of things lean, his pallet systems, his products, more business related questions. So I'm really excited for next week.
Yeah, it should be a blast. And if anybody else has questions they want to submit for us to ask, head over to our Instagram and comment on our most recent Instagram post at Within Tolerance Podcast.
Yeah, just either comment or DM us. Either of the two works, and we'll try to compile as many of them as we can so we can ask Jay some interesting questions and we can all kind of learn more about his business and kind of his business model, because a lot of people know about him from YouTube and whatnot. So that'll be really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And head back too. And if you haven't listened, head back and listen to Dan Rudolph and Adam DeMuth. And we've got a few good interviews on the channel now. So definitely head back and listen to them all if you haven't caught up.
And those have been by far some of the most viewed podcasts. So that's really cool to see that people are enjoying, that third perspective on different aspects of what we do.
Yeah, definitely. Seeing the audience grow and, more and more interaction with our Instagram and our accounts, it's really cool. It's great to see what an awesome community the Instant Machinist community is.
Yeah, it was funny. I mentioned this, I think 2 weeks ago, that I wanted to go back and listen to episode 1 just to see how awkward we were and what we were doing. It is so cringy. If you
is it really?
Back, yeah, don't do it. Seriously, I was we were both so shy sounding. It was weird.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's strange, especially I listen to Late Night podcast a lot, and they're in the same room, so at least it feels more like a normal conversation. Like for us, we're hundreds of miles apart.
Yeah.
And so it takes a little bit of getting used to it. It's like having a phone conversation and knowing many people are going to be listening into it the entire time.
Yeah, I guess it was weird though too, because those first couple episodes we didn't really know each other as well.
Yeah. Well, we had been chatting a lot about fusion and machining specific problems, but not really our backstories or anything like that. So it's been cool to get to know you live on air, but to get to know you as well. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So if you guys want to re-listen to a cringy episode, do episode 1. It's it's actually our most viewed one, so that's cool. But
yeah, it's the only one that's not 100% machining. So whenever family members ask me about it, I'm like, oh yeah, you can go listen to 1, and you might make it through more than half of it. I was I guarantee you the rest of them you're just gonna tune out real quick, like you do when I talk to you normally.
Yeah, really. Yeah, pretty much. I've noticed a couple family members I've listened in, and I just see all of them are just started. They never are finished, but
yeah,
it's all fun and games.
Yeah, for sure. So this past week, what's new with you? How has it looks like you've been keeping the Haas busy, and it marked your year birthday of the Haas. So yeah, how's the last week gone?
So let's see. I want to say Monday, so a week ago, I got that larger order from that one of my semi-local customers, and it was a couple of repeat parts, and then a couple variations of the original parts, and just really small quantities, 4 of each, and then somewhere 8 each, somewhere 30 each. So relatively small quantity stuff, but that came through, and I kind of mentioned this to you off air, but they were yeah, we basically need these by the last week of September, or not September, let's see, October. And they're but we need them, in time for a 4 to 5 week lead time on anodizing. And I'm so that gives me 4 days. And luckily I talked to them, and they don't need them that fast, but there is kind of an emphasis on speed right now. But luckily today I just finished up all the aluminum parts. There's a couple Delrin parts in the whole job, but those can wait. So I got pretty much all the aluminum ones done. I scrapped a couple, so I had to order a couple more pieces of material. but that should be here tomorrow, and I'm not too worried about that. So
Awesome. That's great.
yeah, so just got to finish those up. I have to tumble on, which really sucks when you see that call out and you're like, I have to tumble this part that I worked so hard on, and just kind of ruin the surface finish. But it does look cool tumbled, but I do like the shiny finish personally.
Oh, I'm right there with you. We get parts fairly often that are bead blasted, and like not only does it take away the nice finish, but like to get a consistent bead blast finish that doesn't look like shit is like a lot of work. Like I've it's taken a few orders of me sitting there, like, banging my head literally against the glass of the bead blaster to be like, I really need to start thinking about this in my quoting process and adding it in as like an operation, because it was so easy for me at the beginning to just write it off as like, oh yeah, and then you bead blast it in 5 seconds and then you're done. And it's like, nope, that's not how it is. You got to clean them, you got to bead blast them, you got to clean them again, you got to, you have your media costs, all that stuff. So yeah, I'm right there with you. That anytime you have to touch a machine finish after it's so nice, it's frustrating.
Yeah. Luckily with tumbling, it's pretty much for me. I can just throw them in the little. I have just one of those little 15-pound Harbor Freight ones that I throw it in there for like an hour or two, and it does a pretty good job. And they just want basically a uniform surface finish. Just I think for before they anodize them, because some of these are getting turned black, but some of them are also getting like a clear coat and like getting etched. So they just kind of want all the tool paths to be more or less blended.
I gotcha. So you could almost like Scotch Brite them in a uniform direction, and they'd probably be happy with it too.
Yeah, I actually did that one time before I even had the tumbler. That's what they told me to do. So it's just easier to tumble them because they're, complex shapes, and I don't want to, waste all that time.
Oh yeah, well, and, I mean, if you can do other things while the parts are tumbling, like that's ideal, 100%.
Yeah, I just got to be careful because what I do is a lot of these have 172 tapped holes.
Oh,
So
yeah,
I try to find really small like zip ties to put in those holes just to be safe. I don't want like the leading edge of the thread to get screwed up. I don't think it would because the media I use is so big, but I just don't want to risk that.
yeah. Well, I mean, like the media breaks down though. Like we have at my day job problems all the time with threads being checked on the floor, totally fine. They go through deburr, get tumbled, and then because of all the fine media that's like ground up in the bottom of the tumbler, they get rejected in inspection because the go gauge gets hung up on all of this garbage that's left in the threads.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. So it's we try to change out the media and the water more often because of it, and really have to have somebody just sitting there and blowing out threads, and even then, on tiny threads, stuff still gets stuck down in there occasionally. So yeah, I think that tumbling and filtering tumbling media and like all of deburr in and of itself is like such a giant machining pain that so many people have to deal with, and like it's the little things like that that you never really think about.
Yeah, I remember at my old day job, my first job at the Swiss machine shop, I didn't realize how big of a deal deburring was. I mean, they had a whole department for deburring.
Oh yeah, yeah, we've got a whole department at my day job too, and like I when I first started there, they had onboarding where you spent like a couple days in every department, and I ended up spending like a week in deburr because they really needed the help, and I was just like cleaning and blowing off parts and then using their parts washer and then doing a little bit of deburr. And I just man, I give them so much props because I do not have the temperament to just like sit there and deburr. Like it I feel very fortunate for what I've learned in inspection and deburr at my day job because it makes my parts better, but I don't think I could last in a job that was 100% deburr all day every day.
No, I agree. I would watch these people. Then again, granted, I'm standing in front of a couple Swiss machines, just kind of twiddling my thumbs, watching parts be made and not do much. But still, like watching these people deburr tens of thousands of parts, it's just like that's just like demoralizing.
Oh yeah, well, and it's quite a big weight on your shoulders too. I mean, there's hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars of material and man hours sitting right there in front of you, and one slip of the knife or something like that, and you have just scrapped apart.
Yeah.
It's pretty significant the undertaking of doing a debar position correctly. So
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean it's the last step in the whole process.
right, exactly. I've seen far too many parts scrapped or had to be reworked because of poor deburr or missed deburr, or it's just it's crazy. It really is. I mean, there's a reason that so many CNC guys mantras is deburr as much as you can on the machine, and it's like because the machine doesn't get tired, the machine doesn't miss things. Like if you chamfer it in cam and you chamfer it in the machine, then it's not missed unless the tool breaks somehow.
That's the best way to do it.
Yeah, I mean it's definitely not doable all the time, but I definitely try it as much as I can.
Yeah. So I got to get those parts tumbled. And so after this conversation, I'm definitely putting zip ties in all those tapped holes. Um, so I got
Yeah.
to probably go get some really tiny ones. But yeah, I was really bummed because the job overall was going really smooth. And the more simple parts, because all of these parts are like 6-op parts. And luckily they're all pretty much either square or rectangular, so it's just a bunch of smooth jaw, hard jaw, grabbing onto. There's no soft jaws required, but it's just a lot of flipping around, and it takes more time to blow off the parts and the parallels sometimes than it does to actually run the 30-second center drill and tap cycle.
Yeah.
But I got to get. So, what I was saying is the rather simple parts that are just for operations. I don't know what I missed, but picture it's like a 30 or 40 thou wall thickness box, like picture a shoebox shape.
Hmm.
And it's got a 16th inch hole in the side, and then it's got an 82-degree countersink. And long story short, I blew the hole tolerance by not a lot, like a couple thou, because I was just checking with pins. But what was happening was the countersink was actually going too deep, making the hole larger at the bottom. And I was just able to push the pin in just enough that it almost felt like I was breaking a burr, but I was actually there's just a little material. Um, so I just had to back off on the countersink like 2 thou, and then it was perfect.
Hmm. Oh, I've had far too many parts like that. Like at least in your case, it sounds like it was your operator error. Whereas like I've had parts dimensioned where they're like, oh yeah, I want to hold ±3 on the through hole, and then the countersink size that they give you, the math means that the through hole is already oversized. If that makes sense.
I think I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Like they it just goes back to like people who don't have manufacturing experience designing things, and they just like didn't do the math, and they're like, yeah, I want a 125 hole with a like 250 thou 100-degree countersink. And it's like, well, unless I have like a 100-degree countersink that is like tipped off specifically for your size hole, it's going to blow it oversized.
I think I kind of get what you're saying, and I think that's what I ran into because this had such a thin wall thickness to it. You drill the hole, and then you go to countersink it. In Fusion, if you can picture like a hole with a countersink, there was the actual hole. There wasn't much of a hole left. It was like a 3 thou hole depth wise, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, like from the bottom of the countersink to the back side of the wall.
Yeah, I mean, it was like nothing. And
Right.
so that's the issue I was running into. It was just, I was just going too deep with the countersink.
Yeah, that I hate that kind of stuff. Especially, I mean, I haven't seen the print for these, but like if your countersink size was a ±10, that means that you could very easily go that extra 3 thou, and your countersink would be 100% in tolerance, and your hole would be out.
Yeah,
But it takes
things
like
like
a
that.
it takes like a ±10 chamfer to like a ±1 thou chamfer because you have to hold that depth, otherwise your through hole is blown.
Yeah. Luckily, that wasn't the issue here. Yeah, I had ±5, but
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
there
but even
was,
then, I mean, in that case, that means you had to. It's not ±5; it's at least ±3, if not less, because you have to hold that depth so tight to keep that 3 thou of hole there.
oh, I see what you're
If
saying.
yeah,
Yeah.
so it's that kind of like missed tolerancing that can screw up a perfectly good part sometimes.
Yeah. I guess I got a question now that I'm thinking about this. So if I get a call out for, I can't remember, let's just say it's like a 150 deep countersink or something like that, and it's like an 82 degree. So I've always, like, in manual machining, we would just use the back of our calipers to just get as best we could to eyeball the width of that countersink, like that outer diameter.
Mm-hmm.
Is the only other way I can think of is if you like used a ball bearing and a depth mic to verify that. How would you do that?
Ball bearing is a good one. If you have access to an optical comparator, that's a good one. Like we have a USB microscope that came with like a calibration card that has
Okay.
a grid that I think it's 1,000 increments,
Oh wow,
maybe.
so pretty small.
Yeah, it's a 20 by USB microscope or something. Maybe it was 2,000. Anyway, I put that up. I focus it on the hole, put that up over the hole, and then line up one of the edges with the lines. But
Okay.
for the most part, that's a pretty rare instance. Usually the countersink, most of the countersinks that I come across that are like 100 or 82 are plus or minus 10 lately.
Okay.
And for that, like, it's like, well, if I don't see a giant flat on the end of the tip, or as long as I accurately define the tool in Fusion and tell it what size diameter I want to go to, it's going to be fine. And then I'll just check it with calipers, or usually a loop and calipers, so I can actually line up those edges pretty well.
That's smart. I like that idea. I'd never thought of that.
Oh man, I use a loop for so much. I've got one just sitting on my desk at work, sitting on my desk at the shop. They're so cheap and so useful.
Oh yeah, I have those everywhere. I never thought though to hold it up while you're measuring something though.
Yeah, it takes like a lot of light because otherwise you start casting shadows with um, the tips of the caliper. But yeah, I think your way with a ball bearing also works really well. Like if you have a unimic, that's even better. Like a unimic and a ball bearing will work really, really well.
Okay.
And just do the math. I think there's even calculators online that you can just plug in, your ball diameter and your countersink and all that stuff, and it'll just tell you how deep it needs to be.
Okay. I was just curious how you would go about it.
Yeah, there's an inspection that most of the time there are like a million ways to skin that cat, and it's just like what's easiest, what's something I can repeat right in front of the machine. Like the USB microscope is something that I probably will only check 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 parts, just because
Okay.
it's like such a pain in the ass and it's so finicky. Whereas like the ball and the Unimic, it's like I can, if I really need to, I can do 100% inspection, and it doesn't slow me down and doesn't take time. Like I don't have to go over to my desk and sit down and look at the computer screen and line everything up. It's just like, bam, it's done.
Yeah. And it just depends on the how critical the dimension is.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, very rarely do I see a chamfer that's called out super tight. It's nothing like, Adam was talking about that theoretical intersection point that was within 2/10. It's like I never see stuff like that at my shop. At least
Yeah.
not yet. I'm sure one day something will come up like that, but as of yet, we don't really deal with stuff like that.
Yeah, then you're gonna have to put in like a $5,000 NRE to buy a tool to inspect it.
Yeah. Well, really like, or I really want a good optical comparator. I've been looking for one for a while because we've got a absolutely fantastic one at work, and I'm really spoiled by it. And even just one that's like half as good with a DRO, I'd be really happy with. Um,
Yeah.
so we'll see. The one at work we have, like when the guy installed it, he did the check with they're like a gauge block stack for checking CMM error and checking metrology equipment error, and I think he got within 2 or 3 tenths across the entire span.
Jeez.
Yeah, so it's fantastic, and it's got the whole DRO with the computer, so it can calculate radii and skew angles and all kinds of stuff.
So what brand is that?
I want to say it's QVI.
Okay.
I think it's a CC14. Q.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that sounds correct to me. Yeah, it is. So Certified Comparator Products is the sub brand, and it's of a division of QVI. And
Okay.
Yeah, it's man, it's super good. It's got LED lighting instead of like that old um, bulb lighting that's reflected around. So
Yeah.
there's like a, I don't know, there's a ring of LEDs that's maybe 10 LEDs around the front for forward illumination, and then there's a green LED for the back illumination. And so it's like it's so bright that if you don't use the shields to cover up the bulbs when you're looking at it, like you'll blind yourself a little bit.
Yeah.
You'll
I
like
know the
walk
one
away
at my
from it.
old. Oh yeah, no, I know the one at my that Swiss shop because that's all we would check parts on is a comparator, and I started to fall in love with comparators there because they had like two really nice stare at ones, and it's very similar to what you're saying, like LED lights, like they had like a little jog, like um, it's like almost like an Xbox controller that you could move the thing up and down. It was all like picture like a Bridgeport with a electronic or like a motorized knee. You could raise it up, down, all that.
Yeah, yeah, that's how
Um,
ours is too. An X and Y is all motorized, and then the Focus Z is manual.
yeah, I mean, I was shocked at how quickly you could check a very complicated turned part. You could check diameters, radiuses, boom, 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 and you could just be signed off on a part very quickly.
Yeah, well, and there's companies like we were just looking into it the other day. There's companies that will make custom mylar overlays. So, like if you've got a profile tolerance on something that you can't really inspect some other way, you can have them create a custom mylar overlay that has your profile band, and then you just line up your part in it. And if it's in within those bands, then you know you're good.
Okay. I
So there's
know
a
there was a machine show a couple years ago I went to. It sounds similar. It was like a comparator. It was so cool. You could like put a part down on this light table. It would take a picture of it and you could input all your features and tolerances and it would tell you like it would basically give you a green or a red light if it was good, or if it was bad, what was bad. And the guy literally would just take like a handful of parts, dump them on this table. It would all light up green and he would just put them in a bucket, be like, okay, they're all good.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's. I mean, I don't know specifically, but Keyence makes one of those. Dan was talking about that when he was on. Those things are insane. Like
Yeah.
they're so quick. At IMTS, they had one. I think it was a blue light measuring one from Keyence, hooked up with a robot arm and a Swiss machine. I think it was Sugami, if I remember right. And it would run parts that went down a conveyor. The robot would pick like 1 in 5, show it to the light. It would check, I think, 10 dimensions. And then if it was good, it'd put it in one bucket. If it was bad, it'd throw it out.
Yeah. That's crazy.
And I think it would comp the machine to make the next part good.
Of course.
Yeah, it was really cool.
That's crazy.
So
Yeah. That's
you're getting those done. I saw you posted about your ambitious goal. Have you been getting more orders?
Yeah, actually, I did kind of like forecasting. I made a Google Sheets on like, because I did so far, like my year to date sales, my gross sales, and that includes the Lego side of things, that includes machining, all of that. And like, I'm very close to hitting a very, you know, well sought after gross sales number for a while, and I'm like super close because I did forecasting. I'm like, okay, I know the holiday season does this. I know I have this many more conventions. I know, this order gone through, boom, 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 and I'm like really close, and I'm just trying to get a couple more decent sized jobs in, and then I can just hit that and be extremely happy.
Awesome.
So hopefully the parts I'm working on now, supposedly they're still in the prototyping stage. So hopefully maybe after this, within maybe a month or so, they might come back with an actual production order, and that might just do it, to send it over the top.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, so pushing for that, but I think it's doable.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it seems like you've been getting steadily more and more business, which is great.
Yeah, so I'm really excited.
Very cool. And then I said it earlier, it's your 1 year anniversary with the Haas.
Yeah, so I think it was yesterday was 1 year ago when I signed, and then I got the machine. Technically, the 1 year would be October 31st, Halloween. I got it on Halloween, which was kind of a cool treat. Um, But yeah, it's crazy that a year's already gone by from me because there was a lot of like thought before buying this. It was like, am I making the right decision? Am I buying the right machine? And at one point, I remember I was just like, I literally had like so many different contracts, quotes from companies. There's a whole nother story that we could talk about some other time about. I almost bought a Doosan machine instead of a Haas. Like I had money put into it and everything. Like it was like within like a couple of days of going through, and I decided to switch. Um,
Really? Oh
and
yeah, we definitely need to talk about that. I'd love to hear what made you switch and all that.
yeah, that would be a fun story. And so I just remember I had everything laid out, and there was a point I was like, you know what? Like, there's a bunch of things you think about it, and one of them was like that I was getting hung up on is like, okay, I buy this machine for talking purposes. It was like $70,000. Like, I'm not losing all that money. Sure, I'm going to take a hit for, it's kind of like the taking the car off the lot analogy, but it's not like all of a sudden I get the machine and I'm not going to be able to get any money for it. Like it's going to hold its value. And there was a point and I was just like, all right, screw it. Let's just go for it, type thing. And so far it's paid off quite a bit. So I think I made the right decision.
Yeah, for sure. One on Haas like keeps their resale value like no other machine tool.
Yeah.
It really is insane. I've seen what 8 or 10 year old Haas's that are going for you know insane money,
Yeah.
50% or 60% of new, or if not even more.
Which is crazy because every now and then I'll go on like eBay or some of these machine reselling sites, and a lot of times, especially on eBay, there's not a lot of Haas mills out there right now. Like they're all getting bought up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's when the economy's good. It's really hard to find used machine tools.
Yeah, but it's kind of cool to see that. That means, like you said, if I could get in 8, 10 years, 50% of my cost back, I would be beyond ecstatic.
Oh, totally. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so yeah, it's been crazy. A year's coming up, and yeah, it's crazy because I'm already like in the thought process of like, okay, what's the next machine going to be like? And it's like, wow, that kind of happened quickly.
Yeah.
But like I've told people, is just going through the process of buying like an official machine like this, not something on eBay or anything, but like an actual machine through a distributor, all that stuff. Like just that in itself, I learned a lot. And so now looking for another machine, I'm not as scared, oh, okay, I got to go through this dealer or whatnot. Like I know the process now. So
Oh, totally. That's great.
yeah, so more
What's
things to come.
what do you? What's your gut feeling for your next machine? Are you looking lathe or 5 axis or another three, or what's? I know you've kind of jumped all over the place as far as what you want next.
Yeah, it's so hard to tell because like I know if I got another 3 axis, I could definitely get work for it. Like that's not an issue, but it's like why would I spend that money? Because we talked about this. Is like you said something that really stood out to me. Is like I can't remember how you said it, but you're like spending money in 5 axis is the smart way to spend money in the future type thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
for me not to, I could spend another, let's say $50,000 on like, let's just say a Haas mill of some kind. And it's like, okay, that's great. My capacity, let's say for talking purposes, doubled. Okay. But why not wait and save up and get a 5 axis and kind of get with the program of, the new age type thing?
yeah, yeah. It's a tough decision. I know we were actually just talking this weekend about maybe replacing the Kitamura with like another brother for the meantime until we
Whoa,
can get.
really?
Yeah, I don't know how quick or if it'll happen at all, but just, I mean, the Kitamura is getting up there in age, and really we'd like something with probing and local support. Like, and I mean, I've waxed poetically before about how great the Amazon support has been so far. And so just having both of those things, if as another used machine to come in would be really nice, and I think would really help us, especially probing. Like I use it so often at work now that it's so much better than having to, use a hammer, and then, what if something shifts, or if you're trying to go from raw stock and not have to account for stock variations, things like that. Like, there's just so many things you can do with it, measuring, recutting. So that's one thing I really want to focus on, is trying to get things to improve our process reliability, and just
Okay.
speed up our setups and all of that.
So with like some of the parts that you've been running in the past couple weeks, because you've been doing like a lot of one-offs and whatnot, would those be suitable to like a small 5-axis machine, or are they more, I mean, even positional work, but on a 5-axis?
Oh yeah, yeah, it'd be great. But like, it would be, I think, an order of magnitude different price, as far as like getting a used brother versus a even a new M140. Or I guess now it'd be, I'd wait until next year and get the M200 or M300.
Okay.
So we'll see. Like, there's one, I think Resell CNC had it, and it was a Brother TC SDNO, which is like the last generation right before the Speedio, and it had a Nikin fifth table spindle probe tool setter. But I haven't asked them yet for a quote. But I mean, you're talking 30 or 40% of a new machine, probably.
Yeah.
So, well, I don't know. We'll see. Like, we can still get some good money for the Kitamura. It runs great. It's just support's kind of lacking. Takes up a lot of space with like the pallet changer and the conveyor and everything. And parts are getting harder to find. Like, you can still find them on eBay. You can actually get parts through Kitamura, but they're just expensive. And really, we've been running so many parts so quickly on the Brother that it would be fantastic to get one with a newer control that can really do some surfacing.
Yeah. I mean, what year is the Kitamura?
2001.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's getting up there.
Yeah, and granted, our Brother is 2000,
Oh,
but
wow. Okay.
yeah, and that's really what hinders it. Is it's the A0 control, which is their first generation control, so it doesn't have the look ahead to do some really nice smooth contouring and 3D machining. Whereas like the Kitamura has look ahead for days. The controller is probably one of my favorite controllers I've ever used as far as a 3-axis goes. Like, the Yasnak control is just so powerful for what it is. I mean, I was running a Robo drill this week and our brand new Doosan D&M at work, and both of those like have issues chugging through code that our Kitamura never has.
Really?
And like, granted, they both have high speed codes you can turn on and yada yada yada. Like, I have a high speed card in the Kitamura, and we have never turned it on the entire time we've used it.
Wow.
Yeah, so like that control just processes code at mind-boggling speeds for 2001.
That's crazy to hear that, really.
Yeah, it's shocking and like weird that Yasnak just kind of fell by the wayside, because at least in my experience, we've got some i80 controls at work, and I've got the i80 J300 bastard that's in my machine. It's so well thought out. It's like Fanuc, but with easier menus a little bit and easier setup, I think, and just like some quality of life improvements that I like better. Like, if you type something in on a Fanuc and you switch between like position and program, or position and offsets, or something like that, it clears that. On a Yasnak, it just stays. So like, if you're
Okay.
in the wrong mode and it gives you the warning wrong mode, you just switch modes, and then it's still there. You don't have to retype it. You don't have to re-input it. It's right there.
That's
Um,
nice.
yeah, and it's like a little thing, but going between my machine and the machines at work, like every time I'm in memory mode and I'm trying to edit something and I forget, and then I hit edit and it deletes everything I just tried to edit. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me! Like, come on.
No, yeah, I know that pain too.
Yeah. So I don't know. It's weird, but we've got a B0 control brother at work. I really like it. It's their controls are really similar from like the absolute early generation to the newest one. They just get progressively faster, and have more options and things like that. So I don't know. We'll see. It's nothing's set in stone. Nothing. We've done nothing more than just kind of look around what's out there.
Yeah. One thing I was going to mention is IMTS is going to be in a less than a year now.
I know. I'm
That's
excited.
going to be crazy.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, so I don't know. There's going back to what you were saying about me looking at like 5 axis and stuff. I keep looking at like the TRT 100 and it's just like so expensive to me. It's like $30,000 for the actual rotary. Then I got to pay like I want to say close to anywhere from 5 to 8,000 for all the wiring and all that, all the drives. And then I'm basically obligated at that point to get probing. So that's another 5, and I mean that's like 40 some thousand. It's like I could buy a mini mill with that price. But
Yeah,
then it just goes back into that thing. It's like, would I rather have 2 3 axes or one decked out 3 axis?
yeah. Well, I think who was it? The guys on Machinist Therapy Hotline. I think it was Harry Boomer. He went on live the other night and had Yeti Man on, and they were talking about how that's like how China has such cheap manufacturing, is like rather than invest in like really high end machines, they just buy like an absolute metric ton of 3 axis mills, and they don't care what the cycle time is. They just load them all up next to each other and just have them
Yep.
run all day, every day, forever. You know.
No,
So
I mean it makes sense.
yeah, but I think for you, you've got only you.
Yeah.
So it really it comes down less to like I don't know, like personally when I'm at the shop alone, unless I have really long run times or like even I don't know, they've got to be 5 or 6 minutes at least a piece. It's hard to keep both machines running,
Yeah.
especially if you have any kind of in process checks or anything like that, or you have to make any changes. The other machine catches up to you real quick, and then you're doing either two machines poorly or one sitting while you're working on one. Or I would much rather have one machine that can do checking for me or can do more of the work for me and extend that runtime. I would love even a fourth axis at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I was just looking at some of these parts. I mean, I can send you some pictures, but I mean, 6 ops is a lot of flipping. And, I can easily hold all the tolerances plus or minus 5 with, just a part stop and whatnot. But just being able to turn these parts into like a 2 setup, even for some of these, just a 1 op because you could tab them, like, that's just a huge time saver for me.
Oh yeah, yeah, like that thin one that I think I remember. It had like the step down in it and stuff.
Yeah,
That's like pretty much a maybe 2 op, but like the second op would just be cleaning up whatever was left from like a key seat cutter.
exactly.
So yeah, it's I don't know. It's definitely becoming an interesting debate in my head, and clearly here too, of like where is the smart money, especially when you're a small shop and your funds are so limited. Like there's only so many places you can spend money, and it's gotta. I mean, it's gotta both make you money now and set you up for the future. So
Yeah. I mean, thinking about it, it'd be a lot more fun for me, I think, to make these parts on a 5 axis one because I've never actually done much work with them. I programmed like positional stuff and ran it on like DMG machines and stuff like that. But like to actually sit down and like fully program it and run it, I think that would just, it'd be a lot more fun than just flipping apart and running a 30-second cycle 6 times.
yeah, oh yeah, totally.
And there another thought was looking at the UMC 500. I talked to my local rep, and they said they should have one in their showroom in January. So I'd like to go look at that machine in person because they have a 750 there, or it might be 1,000. I don't know. I saw it at the open house, but if I could somehow fit that in a garage, I don't know if it's possible. I got tall ceilings. It's just getting it through the door. But like, then the thought is, what if I sold my DM and then took that money and put it towards just this one machine and really get a decked out machine?
Oh yeah, that'd be cool. That'd be really
I
cool.
mean, so there's different, angles of attack to this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like when we were looking at selling the kitty, like we would definitely take that money and put it towards whatever new brother or I mean, I have no idea what one of those CNC resellers would give us for it, but I'd at least see what they would and see if it made sense. I don't know. It was just one of those random thoughts while we were running both machines this past weekend. I was like, well, this might be smarter money. Is like get something a little newer, something that we can get support for, all of those things.
Yeah, I mean, and for you, I can't remember how big your shop is, but a brother, I mean, you'd have a lot more room, I would feel like.
Yeah, yeah, we'd have a lot more room and probably more electrical overhead too.
Okay.
Like the brothers are technically 30 amp machines, but I've heard of people running, two of them on like a 40 amp breaker. So I think really that 30 amps is pretty worst case scenario of like everything, and really all machines when they're rated for amperage, it's like every single solenoid and everything going max and firing all at once.
Yeah.
So it would give us quite a bit more room in the shop. It'd give us quite a bit more power overhead because right now we're kind of right up to the ceiling, at least if we go by the max amperage of everything. And the other thing that like you've got a screw compressor, so we've got a piston compressor,
Oh,
and that thing
geez.
runs all the time because the kitty is an air oil spindle. It's way oil, and it just bleeds air through the spindle, like so much air. Like that, there are days that we go in and just don't turn on the kitty if we don't have to because the brother uses such little air. Our compressor never runs in comparison, and the whole shop is just so much quieter. Plus, the kitty has it has a spindle chiller, which makes a ton of noise. Like there's just a bunch of things in the kitty that make a absolute ton of noise. And so the noise pollution is much less with the brother.
It sounds like the kitty is kind of like, not to be rude to the Kitamura, but like old and clunky kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, like the controls real fast, it moves really quick, but like it's built very differently.
It's a beast.
Yeah, it is. It's a beast, exactly. Like it's not a small, light little 30 taper. But we'll see. I mean, Brad really wants a 40 taper machine too.
Okay.
So we're going to look at those two. We're just going to kind of weigh our options and see where we're at. And nothing's in a rush right now. Like the Kitamura is still making great parts, but it's just a thought right now.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Yeah. I was going to ask you. So if you remember on last week's episode with Adam, his mini mill is a grease pack spindle.
Mm-hmm.
And mine is, so I can't remember what you just said. It's air oil activated or whatnot.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was like the default. I don't think there was any other option. Is grease packed like the more cheaper version?
It's just a different way of lubrication, but you can't get as high RPM. You have a 15K spindle, right?
I have just 10.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised about that. Yeah, I mean, our air oil is like what it is it's literally purging a oil mist into the spindle bearings every however what your timer on the unit is set to, and so it they can run at higher speeds. They can run at higher speeds longer. They don't heat up as much. Like grease pack spindles can heat up over time.
Okay.
I mean, not enough to damage them usually, but it's just a different way of lubrication.
Okay.
Not a lot of machines. More machines seem like they're going towards grease pack, just because it's less maintenance and less air and all that.
Because my compressor runs basically nonstop, and I never mentioned this, but that one day my compressor quote died, and I had to have the guy come out.
Mm-hmm.
It was totally fine. It was for whatever dumb reason I never checked the breaker tripped for whatever reason,
Oh,
and
weird.
he checked all the amps coming in, all the voltages, everything was fine. It just had to have been some weird. We don't really know why, but I asked him. I'm like, so this compressor runs literally 24/7 when the machine's on. And he said, no, they're happy when they're running. And that makes sense. But it's like when Adam talked about his machine needing just this tiny little air compressor, I was just like, hold on a minute. Like, that would be a really nice, but I don't know if I could get away with that. A
I,
grease pack spindle.
I think for what you do, an air oil is probably better since you
Yeah.
run at such high RPMs for such extended periods of time.
Okay.
It's probably better. And really, from what I've heard, screw compressors like to be run like either 100% of the time or very little. Like they don't
Yeah.
like 50% duty cycle kind of stuff. And that's why they came out with variable drive, variable something screw compressors where it'll actually like change the speed, I think, so that it runs
Okay.
more often but at a different speed. So I don't think you're hurting it at all by having it run that much.
Yeah, that's what he was saying. I was just always wondering because it's just kind of a burden to have that thing. I mean, the compressor's not loud, but it's not quiet. I mean, I sometimes
Yeah, okay.
sometimes the coolant pump sounds louder than the compressor. I mean, it's just like I wish machining could be quiet, everything but the cut.
I understand. Um,
Yeah,
that's one reason that we have looked pretty heavily at getting a screw compressor and getting rid of our compressor. Is
yeah.
that it's like really nerve wracking when you're proving out a program and all of a sudden the compressor kicks on and all I can hear is that and I can't hear my cut at all. And it's like,
Oh
well,
Jesus,
I
yeah.
hope it's good. Like that's just where you like grin and bear it and hope that when the coolant turns off and the tool retracts that it's still there and you're like, oh, it is, okay, cool.
Balls to the wall and just go for it.
Yeah. So,
That's funny.
oh man, yeah. So,
So, did you want to talk about our little Instagram thing we were talking about?
oh yeah, sure. So the idea is, and you guys, our audience, will have to give us feedback and see if you guys want to do it. We're thinking that when we get to 500 Instagram followers, which is pretty soon, I think we just are just about to cross 400 today. We'll go live on Instagram the same day that we're recording the podcast and have people go live with us and come on and ask a question live or chat with us for a couple seconds and just have a bunch of people cycle through and kind of add a bunch of voices to the podcast for a special 500 follower episode. So if you guys want to do that or you guys want to be a part of that, keep your eye out on Instagram and your ear out on the podcast, and we're thinking that that's what we'll do. And if it sounds like a good idea to you guys, definitely reach out. I'll put the question in our Instagram post for this episode, and we'll just see what people think.
Yeah, and let's see, that'll probably be because I bet you we'll get to 500 before. Because next week we're doing Jay Pearson. Then the following week we'll probably already be at 500, but we'll probably do it that episode anyway, unless we want to do like a bonus episode.
Yeah, we'll just have to play it by ear. So yeah, we got him next week. So maybe it'll be the week of the 7th or the following week, which would be the week of the 14th.
Okay.
So, well, yeah, we'll play it by ear and kind of see where it takes us.
Okay, cool. Is there anything else you wanted to talk about, or should we wrap it up?
No, I don't know. We had kind of a normal weekend. We had some real quick turn parts again. We've got one customer that pretty much all of their parts are between 3 and 5 day turnaround.
Oh, geez.
And they're willing to pay for it, which is fantastic. And I mean, it means that I haven't been able to get anything done in the shop that I wanted to. Like we're just starting on that gauge tracking program, and I haven't had a chance to really implement it. I have all the stuff now to put on the coolant coalescer, the coolant, the mist away, and it's just been sitting because I haven't had time. I finally just ordered like a whole bunch of tools, like cutting tools, just because I had a part last week. I guess we didn't talk about it because we had a guest. So I had a part that had like a 1/8 inch. Man, these were just like the tiniest parts I've probably done in a long time, and I had to tab them out And my first thought was like, oh, I'll use the glue and tape method and hold them down and then cut them. And immediately, like 2 or 3 cuts in, it just ripped this little. I mean, it was like a tiny ½ inch by ½ inch by ½ inch piece of stock, and just ripped it off and threw it against the enclosure. And I was like, okay, well, not doing that. So I looked at the tool under the microscope, and I had chipped one of the flutes, and I was like, oh, well, I'll go back through and kind of look. While I'm here, I'll look at some of my other 1/8 inch end mills and 3/16, and the used ones that I had put away just because I wanted a fresh tool for a part. And man, like most of them were chipped in some way.
Yeah.
I was like, oh man, it's like the blessing and the curse of having a microscope is now I can see how bad some of our end mills were. So I went through and bought a few of every size for aluminum cutting that we use. And I'm just going to go through and scrap a whole bunch of end mills and retool up the machines and make sure that everything's, up to par.
Makes you question how you got that far with the tools.
Right. It's like, oh, well, that's why I haven't been able to push that tool harder, or that's why, this tool path didn't work out or didn't look as good as it could, or, there's a whole bunch of things that you look back on and you're like, oh, this is starting to make sense.
Oh yeah, there's always a reason.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a busy weekend. We knocked out a bunch of parts, but more or less just business as usual, trying to keep up with pretty much just everything. Just keep up with quotes, keep up with not really marketing, I guess, but like we're going to that first tech event next week, the day after 2nd, I think, is when we're going. So I'm excited for that. Kind of see, because it's at a potential customer, maybe, or at least a place that I had wanted to go for a while to drop a line card, or well, we don't have line cards, but drop a business card and things like that. So we'll see if it's worth joining the Arizona Tech Council and just kind of go from there.
Yeah, it might be worth it. If not, you'll find out pretty quickly.
Yeah, and it was a little busier than it should have been this last weekend because it was my birthday Thursday, so I had a bunch of family stuff all weekend too, and it was like trying to balance the business and that. So,
ooh, happy late birthday.
Thanks. Yeah,
that's awesome though. Yeah, that's always one thing is balancing, being kind of a one-man shop for both of us, balancing like family things. It's like, well, I gotta do this part for this customer that's like due tomorrow, so like, can we reschedule this?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, even with, Brad's like such a big help because he can be there during the day, but even with the both of us, it's tough balancing like being a person and being a shop owner at the same time.
Well, yeah, especially with you guys that work normal hour day jobs, more or less.
Yeah, it gets rough. I was at the shop finishing up some parts last night till about midnight, and these were parts that like I thought were a slam dunk home run. I was like, oh, I'll be home by like 8:00. Like it'll be a couple hours in the shop. It'll be done, no problem. And then, the material was kind of an oddball. I had never worked with it, and the parts were really thin and were just warping all over the place. And, oh man, it was a nightmare. I got home at like 12:30 and I was like, this is the worst night ever.
Hey, you stuck to it though.
Yeah, it got like real hairy. Like I had 3 parts to make and I had 4 parts, and my setup part on the last stop didn't look great. And so I was like, oh, I'm not going to use that. And then I ran 2 parts, and then on a third one, I have no idea even how it happened, but like the part picked up in my jaws and scrapped it out. And so I had to rerun my setup part and hope and pray that I could fix the error that was on it, and be able to ship that. And then it ended up being fine, but like it was already, I don't know, 11:30, and I scrapped that last part, and I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, of all the things, like I had been bitching all night to Brad over text and just like, this is the worst. I hate this. And then I was like, and of course I scrapped my last part. The
night's not over yet.
Yeah, this is my night. So, but yeah,
it's like, probably those nights that you don't text me.
Yeah, no, it's one of those nights where I don't want to really text anybody, but
No, I
you
know.
know, it's like I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this, but you got to get it done.
Yeah, that's funny.
Um, yeah, thanks everybody again for listening and interacting, and this is a lot of fun for both of us. We really appreciate everything.
Yeah, seriously. So if we could push for some more followers on Instagram, that would be awesome. But I think within, maybe within a week we could get to 500. I don't know, but it's going to be. I'm curious to see what we'll do by the end of the year. I think we could get to 1,000.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. I can't. I
So
mean, that would be absolutely insane. Like I keep saying it over and over, but I never expected like 100 people to listen to us, and I think, like you said, last time we looked, we're at like a 400 estimated audience or something like that. So
yeah,
it's insane to me that so many people listen to us, and yeah, it's just really cool, really humbling.
yeah. Well, I think from the get go, we kind of knew we had something cool and unique, and I'm glad that we, gave it a shot and it's paying off. So
Yeah, definitely. I think all of the machinist podcasts right now really serve a really unique niche, and they're, from what I've seen so far, none of them really step on each other's toes. Like, we all do our thing very differently, and I really enjoy them. Like, I really enjoy Machinist Therapy Hotline and Business of Machining and Lathe Night, and it's just really cool to hear so many different voices in machining.
well, yeah, and I mean everybody has their own unique story. You started with a buddy of yours and have XY machines. I have this just one machine. Like everyone has their own unique stories, and it's cool to kind of watch not only people grow, but like, okay, I have a bunch of parts to make. How do I personally deal with it? Because I only got one machine, and vice versa.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is really just really interesting. Like the uh, Eddie on the DFX podcast, he just got a Neo. What's it called? A Datron. So I'm really like interested to start hearing more about that, and yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah, so I'm curious to see where we'll be in the coming months, but I think we're gonna end it here if you're okay with that, Dylan.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's end it here, and everybody have a good night. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
All right, guys, see you next week with Jay Pearson.